Hi everybody. So in this week's blog or vlog, depending where you're watching it or whether you're reading it, I'd like to talk about one of the main reasons why people don't increase their self-awareness. One of the biggest things that gets in the way, and it gets in the way for us and for others. And understanding it helps us manage ourselves, but it also helps us understand and interact with other people effectively. And both those things are all part of being a confident leader. Now, we've talked before about the Johari window, about that 2x2 matrix, about what's known to you and unknown to you, what's known to others and unknown to others. And in that, I talked about the blind spot, which is where other people know things about us and we don't. And in that vlog, we discussed how feedback can really help us expand our self-awareness so that blind spot shrinks. So when somebody sits us down and gives us feedback on something, it can help us become more aware of things we weren't previously aware of. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had a few experiences where feedback has not been welcome. In fact, it's been brushed off and almost denied. And this has happened both in personal and professional settings. You know how you can see something so clearly and you get the person's consent to give them some feedback. You carefully position a benefit as to how what you're about to say to them will really help them. So an example would be, I was coaching some people for interviewing, and it was like, well, if you really want to give that impression so you can get this job, here's a way to do it. And are you aware that? And a typical thing I often end up coaching women in particular on is that when they answer questions about their experience, they tend to sit back, tilt their head, and soften their tone, which kind of minimizes. And they also tend to use the word we more often. We did this, we did that. So the coaching and feedback was around, are you aware that you do that? And if you actually sit up, make eye contact, don't tilt the head when you're saying it, and say I, the impression on the interviewer is much more powerful. So I was doing this, and quite frequently people would appear to agree with me in the meeting and in the session. But in the next video we did, where they were doing a role play of an interview, nothing had changed. Interesting. So there was obviously a disconnect between what they knew up here would help them have a more effective interview and what they were able to do. And this is the interesting thing about the self-awareness and this denial and this blockage to the feedback, is it can sometimes be conscious, but more often than not, it's totally unconscious. This is why I love working with confidence, because it's all about the unconscious working away behind the scenes. So what's going on here? Why wouldn't someone, when you give them perfectly rational feedback about how to improve their interviewing skills, why wouldn't they act on it? You can probably think of some examples yourself in your life where either you haven't acted on feedback or somebody else hasn't. So let's work this one through. In order to answer this, I want to introduce to you the concept of secondary gain. Sounds quite complicated, doesn't it? But actually, it's a phrase that coaches use when they say that there's a behavior that is apparently having a negative impact on you, so the primary effect is negative, but actually there's an underlying gain to the behavior which the unconscious is focused on. Wow. So here's the thing. When I started actually coaching mindset with the people who are going through the interviews, so we'd play the video back and they'd see themselves doing this and using the we and sitting back in the chair and almost minimizing themselves. When I actually showed them the video, we were sitting next to each other having a conversation about it. What usually came out was, but if I sit up and I say I, and I talk like you're telling me to talk, I'm going to come across as aggressive and the interviewer is not going to like me. Aha. So the unconscious had a set of beliefs or a theory or an understanding that if you sat up, answered the question clearly and directly, used the word I and owned what you'd done in a team, it would come across as aggressive and the interviewer would not like you. There's two things there, how you are perceived and whether you're liked or not. But by sitting back and tilting the head and minimizing, you become more acceptable to people. Now, this might have been learned behavior from when we're children. We often learn things. So we might have learned early on that saying things directly was not as well received as if we softened it and minimized it by doing this. Interestingly, I do think it's very gender biased, but we can explore that in another vlog. But what the important thing here is that underlying belief that sitting up straight and talking clearly and saying I was aggressive and would lead to them not being liked by the interviewer was stopping them from being able to change their behavior. And they weren't really aware of it until we did that coaching session where I showed them the video and we dug deep into why that was happening and the difference between the intellectual understanding of what needed to happen to be more effective in interviews and actually doing it. So it's an interesting example. And of course, once we uncover that, what the secondary gain is, we need to think about how can we meet that need, because that's obviously a need. The unconscious there obviously has a need to be liked, to be not seen as aggressive, etc. How do we meet that need, but still enable the person to do a successful and powerful interview? So the question changes. It changes from just giving feedback how to do X to giving feedback how to do X and keep the unconscious happy that you're not going to have any negative consequences. Now, secondary gain happens in a lot of places. So, for example, smokers. Great example of something that rationally is, to many of us, appears ridiculous. Why would you voluntarily damage your body? However, what's the secondary gain that smokers get? When you're young and you start smoking, it's peer acceptance. Joining everybody else smoking, joining everybody else drinking. The secondary gain from a behavior that primarily seems negative is so powerful, it drives you to do things that could actually be physically damaging, mentally damaging, or emotionally damaging. Okay? Now, please don't get the idea that I think secondary gain is totally a bad thing. As leaders, we need to be aware of this, and we need to make sure that when we're looking at people's behavior and our own, by working out what the secondary gain is, we might actually uncover something that is critically important and essential for a person to maintain. And if we'd ignored it and forced the behavior change, we would have actually had a negative impact on the person. So it's very important for us as coaches and leaders to know this about ourselves and about the people we're coaching. And this is often a blind spot I find coaches have. I find they go, right, this is the behavior we need to change, da, 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 da. And I ask the question, why do you think they're doing that? What do you think the benefit is that they're getting from that behavior? And quite often they're stopped in their tracks. But here's the thing. Why should someone wholeheartedly change their behavior if they're getting a benefit from doing it how they're doing it now, and we don't find another way of fulfilling that need that behavior is serving? Quite a complex issue this, the secondary gain, but actually quite straightforward for us as coaches and leaders, is before we address a behavior, we need to ask, what benefit is that behavior giving that person? And if we don't know, we might need to sit down and have a conversation about that. Because only then can we truly unpick things and help the person find another way of behaving that's more constructive for the environment, for the workplace, for the job. And this applies to us as well. If I find myself doing a self-destructive behavior like procrastinating, don't we all do that? Putting off doing a video, for example, for the vlog. Not that that happened today. Here's the thing. If we ask ourselves, why am I doing that? What's the benefit of putting it off? And because I had a very good coach once, I discovered that for me, procrastination is, for me, I always think I'll do it better if I wait a bit longer, if I read a bit more, if I learn a bit more. And for me, it was that kind of perfectionism belief I had. I don't do it unless it's perfect. Don't do it unless your office is perfectly tidy, which is obviously not. Don't do it unless your hair is perfectly tidy, which is obviously not. And so I'm working on the principle of good enough. And with that, I can do the vlogs and I don't procrastinate anymore. But until I understood that and what was the actual block, what was the benefit I was getting from the procrastination, how could I possibly change that behavior? So there you go. As confident leaders, we need to be aware of secondary gain. Ask that question. What benefit is that behavior giving me or them before we start trying to change anything? Okay? Confident Leader Journey. If you want more videos, subscribe to the Confident Leader Journey vlog channel. You'll get the updates as they come out. And also check out the website confidentleaderjourney.com. Lots of links there to other things I have, free stuff, articles, and a link to the free Facebook community that if you're interested in this stuff, it's a great place to hang out. Okay, take care.